Well, we do have more updates on the Chicago White Sox saga that really kicked off last week, and then it was superheated by the shooting that happened, which surprisingly really was kind of brushed under the rug when you look at mainstream coverage of it. It's kind of hard to predict what things are really going to catch with the media. Maybe it's because it happened on a Friday night, but I mean, to have just normal bystanders, normal MLB fans at a stadium, and a stray bullet comes into the stadium because of the crime infested area surrounding it. That's a terrible look for MLB. I'm sorry, it just is. And we've already had dialogue about the location of Guaranteed Rate Field being in a worse spot than Wrigley Field in Chicago. Well, now it's come out. White Sox looking at 3 new stadium locations. The entire timeline can be predicted based off of these locations. I'm going to go through all of it. The lease coming up right at around 2030. And the 3 options you can see, it says the United Center, which is where the Chicago Bulls play, also the Chicago Blackhawks, the NHL team, Arlington Heights, of course, the number 1 favorite, one of the bigger suburbs in Chicago, the current favorite to get the Bears. There's an entire developmental project there. And then also you have Soldier Field. So this is the idea. They would just completely demolish Soldier Field if Arlington Heights gets done, and then possibly immediately start building a ballpark around 2028, 2029. The Bears end up going to Soldier Field in 2030, and the White Sox go to the Soldier Field location. They're trying to move to a safer area, even if they have to stay downtown. Now, there is a little bit more to the story based on the fact that the White Sox are an MLB team. They, in my opinion, they really don't have the luxury to go to a suburb. It's just so hard in terms of attendance because you have so many more games than the NFL. The Bears can go wherever they want and they're going to sell out every game as long as they're good, right? As long as they're good, they're going to get a brand new dome. If Justin Fields turns into a franchise quarterback, they could go to a small suburb 30 minutes from Chicago and sell out every single game because they have 8 or 9 home games a year. The White Sox have 81 home games a year. So them moving to a lower populated area, even though they have to share Chicago with the Cubs, I mean, Chicago just dwarfs every suburb. So I'm sure while the White Sox in a perfect world would like to go to a suburb where it's more safe, they probably will have to do some type of compromise where they're staying in Chicago. But this is all just rumors right now. 2 of the areas that are rumored are both still within Chicago. And then you also have Arlington Heights. But I can't see Arlington Heights getting both the White Sox and the Bears. Imagine 2 stadiums being built at the same time. You can see some of the local people letting us in on some of the details. The United Center, question mark, kind of a weird, why would they want to build a development at the United Center, which is an NBA arena? I've heard that suggested before they would have to add to the property's footprint substantially. There is already nowhere near enough parking for around 40,000 people, and that's before the ballpark takes away a big chunk of the parking currently there. So it seems like the United Center may be a little bit more far-fetched. Maybe they need to buy more acres around the United Center if they also want to have a development. If you take a look at Cleveland, Ohio, they've got something where they have Progressive Field located right next to Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. It's basically across the street. We've seen this in a number of different places. So something like that is really not that rare. But it is, whenever you hear like an NBA arena and MLB, it just doesn't make much sense. Soldier Field and Arlington Heights make 0 sense. Going to Soldier 81 times a year sounds like a nightmare, and Arlington Heights won't get past MLB and the Cubs specifically. Best play is to revitalize 35th and Shields or near the University of Chicago. best play is Jerry sells the team to someone who cares and makes the call. So, I mean, it seems like, I don't know, maybe 70% of MLB fans hate their owners, right? But there's just a little shot at the owner. And look, they're saying Arlington Heights makes no sense. I think the number one reason it makes no sense, honestly, they're saying it won't get past MLB and the Cubs. I just think in terms of attendance, if they're already struggling a little bit to get attendance, the White Sox are, downtown. Although I will be honest, this year has been so bad for the White Sox. I really can't blame the fans for not showing up. It does seem like these three options, I would probably say, the idea with Soldier Field is it's so hard to get in and out of, according to the locals. Doing that 81 times a year would be pretty brutal, but you also have to remember Soldier Field is much bigger than a potential new MLB ballpark that probably would seat around 37K. With standing room, it'll probably go to 40K. That's my rough estimate on how many of these new stadiums are going to be built. I mean, of course, you have Las Vegas pitching like a 30,000 seat stadium, or 33K, I think it's what it is right now. But the stadiums are certainly getting smaller outside of that Orlando proposal, which is somehow 45,000, I think, which is pretty cool. But I would say the idea with Soldier Field, yes, it's a nightmare to get in and out of. You don't want to do it 81 times a year, but you're going to be dealing with half the people. Because you're going to average like 25,000 per game, less than half the people, really, if Soldier Field and the Bears are selling out over 60K. So maybe you can try and sell that, but this is all so far into the future. The Bears haven't even locked down a location right now because they're trying to use cities to leverage against each other in like a bidding war, and they're going off who's going to give them the best deal. I still think it's going to be Arlington Heights, but they are in some type of tax problem with them where they don't want to pay some certain tax or something. I was reading about it a few days ago. I would still imagine the Bears go to Arlington Heights, and if that happens, I cannot see the White Sox going to Arlington Heights for a number of reasons. But the big two being it's too small of a population for an MLB team to play 81 home games. And also, I mean, if the Bears are already there, it doesn't make much sense. But the Bears have thrown around a number of different places. Naperville's also possibly an option for them, so we will see. But just getting back to the White Sox, it's very clear at this point. Seems like they're going to abandon their current location, whether it be because the stadium's not very good. I mean, we have to understand the White Sox are in a spot where you're either going to invest a massive amount of money into a renovation to this terrible stadium, which is routinely ranked in the mid-20s out of all the MLB ballparks. You're either going to do that, or you're just going to build a new stadium, because you would probably have to invest $500 million in a renovation at an area that's already had such crime problems. Chicago, Illinois, the crime situation there is not good. I'm not attacking the city. I know there's great parts. I know you can vacation there if you know the right areas. I'm not saying it's all bad. It's a huge city. I get it. But there are really bad parts, and it does seem like the policies in Chicago are only making the situation work because it's incentivizing criminals to commit more crime. The only way to get rid of this is you go really hard on the criminals. It's tough, I know, but you have to go hard on them. That's the only way they'll stop. If you keep letting them, have a get-out-of-jail-free card, literally, the situation's just going to keep turning out the way it is. We saw 4 Walmarts, of all places, leave Chicago. And you say, well, why would they do that? They have insurance. Yeah, not really. All the insurance companies have said, look, if your location, is within this certain area where you're not going to prosecute crime or theft, then we're going to up your rates so high it's not worth it. So that's more of a bigger issue Chicago is dealing with right now. That's why I would say maybe they go to a suburb. I just don't think they can sustain it because of the amount of home games, and there's just so much supply and there's not as much demand. But, I mean, that's just a terrible look for MLB to have stray bullets come into the ballpark, and they're saying it like they came from a mile away. Just a remarkable story, but right now, those are the 3 possible spots. I would say, in my opinion, this is just a far-out guesstimate. I don't think any of these spots are going to be the ones that get chosen, but if I had to predict, I would say Soldier Field would be the number 1 option, which they would have to, tear down Soldier Field and then build the ballpark right on top of it. The number 2 option would be the United Center area, because we have seen with other cities them do something similar where they've got the NBA arena right next to the MLB ballpark. And then the number 3 option would be Arlington Heights. I'm not sure, a suburb would work for an MLB team. We're seeing a team like the Kansas City Royals. I guess you can make the argument, well, Chicago has the Cubs. That means you can move the White Sox to a suburb. But I don't know. I mean, Chicago just has such a massive population in comparison to all the other suburbs. It doesn't make much sense if you're going for highest attendance possible. This is the Kansas City Royals situation, right? They're going to move closer to downtown or right in downtown Kansas City because they think it negatively affects their attendance, and it probably does by maybe a few thousand. Obviously, the bad play and the bad product is the number one reason for that, but you can certainly understand it. So we'll have to update this. This is certainly a developing situation with the White Sox and what they're going to end up doing, but that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.